Good morning and welcome back to Other Worlds Wednesday here on Gaming with ADHD, where today we're taking a look at The Lord of the Rings role-playing, a 5th edition role-playing setting in the world of The Lord of the Rings. Now, this is published by Free League Publishing, and I was given a copy of the PDF to do a review on. So, I did not have to pay for this. But I very much appreciate Free League giving me the chance to review this role-playing game for you guys. Now, before we get started, I do want to make sure that I let you know that I do try to put out a few different videos each week covering all sorts of tabletop gaming content, whether it's role-playing, miniatures, board games, anything in between. And I'd love for you to come along and see what I have to share. In addition, down below, there are links to our social media out on Facebook and Twitter, where I try to put up the videos so that people know when new videos go live. And if you'd like to follow us that way, we would appreciate it. But with all of that out of the way, let's go ahead and get started. All right, now this was released in 2023 and is actually technically the third Lord of the Rings game that was put out by Free League. They've done 2 editions of the One Ring role-playing game, and this is the 5th edition compatible version of the same setting. So obviously they're getting a little bit of mileage out of the content, but I think they've done a few things that are pretty interesting with this particular book for 5th edition. Now, just as a quick overview, like I said, it was published in 2023. It comes in at 240 pages long. It is available both as a PDF and a physical book. The PDF is $24.99 from TTRPG. There will be an affiliate link down below if you did want to pick this up. Alternatively, you can pick up the physical book for about $50 from Free League Publishing, which does include a PDF from DriveThruRPG as well. And check your local game store. Chances are they can easily get this in for you, and you can support your local business. That does not come with the PDF, however, but it's still, an option that a lot of people prefer. All right. Now, as I said, this is based on 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons from Wizards of the Coast. So you will need a familiarity with the 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons system in order to play this game. If you don't, you are going to want to make sure that you pick up at least the player's handbook and probably the Dungeon Master's Guide as well, just so you have all of the appropriate level information. All right, now, a couple of disclaimers that I want to put out up front. First off, I am not a Tolkien scholar, nor have I read the books. I realize that kind of throws a lot of people off, being the fact that I am kind of a big nerd and into all of this nerd hobby kind of stuff. But I haven't. I've never read the books. So I have seen the movies. Many times, but obviously there's some differences there, so please keep in mind that my references are more towards the films as opposed to the books. Personally, I avoid fantasy games. I prefer spaceships and laser guns, and I realize that in game mechanics, technically it doesn't matter. But if I'm talking about a setting, that's what I prefer. Okay. Doesn't mean I have anything against Lord of the Rings, just not my default kind of a setting. In addition, I have not played any of the previous Lord of the Rings role-playing games. I haven't played One Ring, which I believe uses the Year Zero engine, nor have I played the old, I believe it was Rollmaster version of Middle-earth role-playing from, I believe, the 80s or 90s. So I don't really have anything previous as far as Lord of the Rings to compare it to. I have played a bit of 5th edition, but just not, Lord of the Rings. And also, it's been a while. So there's that. All right, so a few highlights that I want to touch on first. First off, this is not a full role-playing game. It's more like an expanded campaign setting. I say that because they give races, classes, they give pretty much everything that you need to play the game in Lord of the Rings. You get, or Middle Earth, I should say. You have monsters, you have NPCs, you have locations, everything, not all of the Lord of the Rings content, but you have, at least enough to, give you a sense like you're playing out a story that would have been written by Tolkien. Maybe not written as well, but you know what I mean. So, like I said, it's not a full RPG. There are rules that are not included, but it's more like an expanded campaign. It is set about 20 years after the events of The Hobbit. So Bilbo already has the One Ring. He has returned to the Shire, but he has, he has not passed the ring to Frodo. They have not decided that it is time to take on Sauron. So, I think that actually does a lot of good for the game itself because of the fact that it sets it within a time period where there is rising tension. Monsters and evil are starting to to move more around the world. While it will be another about 60 years before the Fellowship takes on Sauron. There's still a lot that the players can do. The players do not replace the Fellowship of the Ring, but they do kind of fill in the stories in between. So obviously these are stories that the players, and in this game they call it the Lore Master instead of the Dungeon Master. So the players and the Lore Master are going to be creating these stories, but you can find ways to slot these things in. And while, yes, you could probably come up with your own story where your party of characters goes and takes on, Sauron. That is not the intent of the setting. It's to still be heroes, but not necessarily the key figures of the stories. Another thing that I think is interesting, it has a level cap at level 10. Now, they do include rules, so if you wish to continue going on, but basically they say at about level 10, your character is now old. They are, they have, maybe it's time for them to retire or pass, past their title and their role onto an heir or something like that. But if you don't think your character story is done, they do say, yep, here are rules how you can continue on with that. Now, the game is divided into 2 phases. The adventuring phase, which is basically your typical role-playing game. Find the treasure, defeat the dragon, explore the forest. It's pretty standard as far as how that goes. But then there's also the council phase that's mixed into that. So I put here that it's kind of like Rivendell. Basically it's, your characters either approach, a king or an elf lord or something saying, we need your assistance, or, we have this problem, what should we do? And so the council phase is a social interaction that actually can provide as much experience as one would expect from any other kind of encounter, whether it's monsters or sneaking into a castle or whatever it is. So they build a lot of social interactions into this as well. So I really thought that was kind of interesting. There's also the journey. Basically the players are given a sheet where they will draw a map of the places that they are trying to go to. There is a map provided in the beginning of the book so that players can reference. I mean, they are heroes, so they are assumed to know a bit more about the land, whereas the average commoner wouldn't. So they incorporate hex crawl into getting from one place to another as well. And then there are of course events. Basically these are the encounters. It's finding and defeating Smog, or escaping from the trolls that are going to cook the hobbits. Whatever it is. Then the second phase is the fellowship phase. So after you've gone on this journey, so you leave the Shire and you're going, you go to Rivendell. Well, then there would be a fellowship phase, basically some downtime, where instead of like in Dungeons and Dragons, if basically you go back to the tavern and you sleep for a night, okay, well, there's your rest. Go on about your business. Well, the fellowship phase, it's an extended rest phase. It's supposed to be, not just a single night's rest, but it's time to recover from wounds, to pursue personal goals. So it's anywhere from a week or an entire season. They don't mention it specifically, but basically a season is approximately 3 months. Part of the reason that I say that is that every 3 fellowship phases, winter comes, or Yule, and basically players have to take a season, and that season basically represents about 3 months. Winter, so it's about 3 months. And then during that Yule season, basically the characters are considered to have aged up an entire year. Or, well, they don't age an entire year in 3 months, but basically, quote unquote, you had your birthday while you were away. So while there aren't I do not remember specific rules for age. Obviously it does imply as your character gets older, they're going to be thinking about that time to retire. We remember in the Lord of the Rings movies, it starts with a birthday for Bilbo, and he's like, yep, I'm tired, I'm old, I'm going to go, see my friends, the elves, and I'm going to retire. So, so they're building these kinds of things into the game, and I really did like how they did that. Let's see. Now, another thing, players are not perfect champions. Obviously, having flaws, having drawbacks do make characters more interesting to play. But in this, there are basically 4 different types of quote-unquote imperfections. There's dread, greed, misdeeds, sorcery. Now, sorcery is not magic as if it was Gandalf, but it's sorcery as in Saruman. So basically, trying to use the magic for evil, and doing these kinds of things are going to give players shadow points. Basically, as you gain shadow points up to, I believe it's half of your wisdom, at that point you become miserable, and you are going to fail checks on either a 1 or a 2. And that makes me want to pull this up and look at it real quick. But then also there is what's called the fellowship rating. So the basically how your players work together. Basically, it's sort of like an action point kind of system that they can get some bonuses. And so there are penalties to the fellowship roll if your character is miserable. Kind of think Boromir and how he was always kind of grumpy about everything. So there's that increased chance of failure. But then if your shadow points get to the same level of your wisdom, then your character becomes anguished. And now anytime they roll for anything, they're disadvantaged, so they have to roll 2d20 and take the lowest roll. So, just like we see in the movies where, the weight and the burden of the adventure that they're on starts pulling down the characters and they start having trouble. So, like, I wanted to point these out. So, Dread. Terror is a spear in the hand of the enemy. Adventurers gain shadow points whenever they witness something capable of striking fear or sowing doubts into their hearts, be it facing a horrible creatures out of the darkest pits of Mordor, entering a place where shadows are made thicker by an ancient curse, or experiencing directly the terrible power of the enemy. Now, this one is, you can resist the effects of Dread by making a charisma saving throw. Next, there's Greed. So hordes of gold and great stores of enchanted weapons and armor lie in forgotten caves. Heroes risk being corrupted by their own desire whenever they put their hands on gold and precious objects that were tainted by laying in the dark for a long time. So, they can resist that by wisdom, knowing that their greed is going to be a problem. Now, there's also misdeeds. This, I think, is interesting. Companions often confront challenges that are so demanding that they might be tempted to adopt extreme measures, especially if they aim to achieve a noble goal. When this happens, the lore master must consider if a course of action can be considered a misdeed. Now, whereas the other, drawbacks can, there's a saving throw. The only saving throw is the lore master saying, hey, you're about to do a misdeed, and the player has to then stop and think, am I going to go through with it? And if they do, well, you're getting shadow points off of it. And then finally, there's sorcery. It is said that those who are in favor of the Dark Lord are often rewarded with evil knowledge. Some are able to wield such knowledge to terrible effect, twisting it into a form of dark magic. Adventurers gain shadow when they fall victim to the dreadful spells of the enemy and his minions. So, you can resist the effects of sorcery with an intelligence saving throw. So I like how they take these things. We saw like the Nazgul blade. We saw all of these things that weighed in on the Fellowship of the Ring and made it difficult for them to continue their quest. And it's the same kind of thing that they're trying to impart in the game. I really like this mechanic. Now, if a player earns too many shadow points, they will suffer a madness. Okay. Basically the madness is, where did it go? Basically they're going to start developing flaws. And if basically if there's a betrayal, well, let me backtrack. Yes, okay, so the madness, there's 4 types of madness. Basically, there's a betrayal by the player, so the player does something to harm the party. Fear that causes the player to retreat. So I believe in the first Lord of the Rings movie, Boromir is, I believe it was Boromir that abandoned the Fellowship. And then they got attacked by the orcs. And, now he did come back, but, he left them vulnerable for a time. Lust for something not the players, like when Boromir wanted to take the ring from Frodo because he thought he could use it to save his kingdom. Or rage against a perceived threat. So whether it's real or imagined, the player is going to do something that could harm the party because they're not thinking clearly. So, basically this bout of madness, will clear out the shadow points, but they are now then progressing along their shadow path. And if after 4 bouts of madness, the player is going to succumb to the shadow. So they are lost to the madness, eventually their death. Okay. If you're playing as an elf, they will say, you know what, it's time for me to return to Valinor, so they will go west. So again, those kinds of things that we saw the characters. Now, there are ways to, I believe there are ways to redeem yourself. But regardless, it's one of those things where, adventuring is not supposed to be easy, and so they've built into the rules, hey, this is going to be a little bit more difficult. These are going to be challenges, put upon your players, and they may not survive them. So I really, really like how they did that. Now, the player and the lore master will decide together what the final fate of the character is. Maybe they're going to succumb to the madness, but they're going to make that one final sacrifice, for the group. Whatever it is, there are, the player and the lore master will work on that. All right, so I've gone through a lot of these just kind of like highlights, things that I think are interesting about the game. They ended up being more likes, which you'll see as I get towards the end. But just to give a little bit more information, there are 6 heroic cultures. Basically, these are your races: the Bardings or Northmen, dwarves, elves, hobbits, the men of Bree, and the Rangers of the North. So basically, you've got 3 human cultures and 3 non or demi-human cultures. There are also 6 callings. Now, these are basically your classes. Each calling has 2 titles to specialize your character. You'll get basically an extra ability at level 3, and you'll also get another ability at level 7. There's the captain, which can specialize to chieftain or thane. Basically, this is a leader type warrior. There's the champion, sharpshooter, or slayer. So think Legolas or Gimli. There's the messenger, which can be a counselor or herald. Scholar, which does healing or lore. So this is going to be your Gandalf kind of character. And then the treasure hunter, so the burglar or spy. Basically, this is your Frodo or your Bilbo. And then the warden, which is the forayer or the hunter. Now, is this Lord of the Rings? Now, to me, absolutely. One of the things that stood out to me the most as I was reading this is it just felt like I was reading not necessarily a script, but a way to reenact the films, to feel like I was being drawn into the world of Middle-earth. There are patrons and councils that make it feel like you are at Rivendell making a plan. So patrons are basically an NPC that basically Gandalf. Gandalf is literally listed as one of the patrons. But basically, there's somebody that will come in, sort of like in Shadowrun, like a Mr. Johnson. Like, hey, I need you to do this thing, or I need you to come with me. So it could be an NPC that joins the players. It could be an NPC that just sends the players to do something. They add points to your fellowship score. So again, being able to tie these kinds of characters that will help the players, in more than just an NPC, oh, I need you to go get my horse kind of a thing. And then the councils, again, you it's a social interaction where, maybe you're asking something small of the king, and so it will be very easy. Or maybe you're asking something that is absolutely impossible, but can you get through the encounter and convince the king to help you on this, this massive undertaking, whatever it is. Then, the fellowship phase, it's like Bilbo returning back to the Shire after the Battle of Five Armies. It's an excuse to try and, not an excuse, but like a reason that a player would level up and gain new abilities. They've gone home. If they've gotten flaws or scars from the shadow, time to rest and recuperate and remove that burden. At the end of The Hobbit, while it wasn't as dark as Lord of the Rings, Bilbo had been through all sorts of things, and so he went home and was able to relax and to get his life back in order. He was able to help raise Frodo and be a guide and a mentor to him. So these fellowship phases are, I think, a very, very interesting mechanic, as opposed to, oh, it's just a rest. Okay, well, you're resting. What are you doing? Why are you doing it? And I really, really like that. Also, magic, it is present. It is rare. Very common for Lord of the Rings. Now, other things that I liked. It makes a non-fan like me want to play a game set in Middle-earth. That's one thing I absolutely love about this. It is very, very loyal to the source material. Like I said, reading through it, I felt like I was being given a guide on how to recreate the movies. Well, not recreate the movies, but make my own stories like the movies. It also seems like it's an OSR product with some modern stylings. When I've read, the books for Dungeons and Dragons 3rd edition or Starfinder or, even Shadowrun, it doesn't have a lot of that old school feel. The fact that they actually, put in hex crawl, put in limited levels. Like the original Dungeons and Dragons, yes, you could go up to level 60, but the thing is that, for all intents and purposes, your character had reached their peak of what a normal person would reach at level 10. And so the fact that they limited it to just 10 levels, I think was very interesting. Also, pushing the social encounters for more role play. Not saying you have to go full on acting, but give reasons for players to sit and talk and, discuss a plan, get experience for it in an in-game setting as opposed to a metagame setting. So I really like that as well. The art. In other role-playing products, you've heard me talk about art. The chapter headings get full color art, and then the rest of the art is kind of this sepia tone line art. I absolutely loved the look and the feel throughout the entire book. It wasn't too much. It wasn't too little. There were pages that would just be plain text, but there was more than enough art to very much get a feel and get drawn into Middle-earth. So I really like that. The art absolutely sets a tone for the game, and I love it. All right, dislikes. I really only had one dislike, and that's that it should have been a full game. When it gets to combat, it just says, hey, you should know how to do combat from 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons. And that's it. With the open gaming license, the fact that they just said, hey, this is for 5e, another 20 pages detailing combat, saving throws, things like that. Should have just added it in and just let it be its own full game. Maybe I'm missing something with how the Open Gaming license worked, but to me, that's what they should have done, because it should have just been a full game. They still could have kept it under 300 pages, but that's what I thought. The only real section missing is dice rolling and combat. Otherwise, it's a complete game. You have your races, you have your classes, you have rules for your journeying, rules for your monsters, your stats, all of that. It absolutely should have been a complete game. All right, so in conclusion, do I want to play this game? Absolutely. I think Free League did a fantastic job with this. Like I said, I do not dislike Lord of the Rings, but even though I have watched the movies many times, it's been many years since I've watched it. So, for someone like me, who, especially because I'm not really a big fantasy fan, I'd be interested to play this game, even if it's just for like a short campaign. I'd at least want to get through a couple of years of play. So that's 6 adventuring sections and 3 or 4 of the downtime sections. I think that's I know I'm mathing it wrong, but regardless, I'd like to play at least a couple of years worth of it, and I think that could be a lot of fun and very, very interesting. Would I recommend this game? Depends. If you obviously are not a fan of Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, that's going to be a big deal breaker for most people. But if you are a 5th edition player, if you're a regular Dungeons & Dragons player, or when I say regular, I mean 1st edition, or pretty much any edition, the D20 mechanic is not difficult. So, it's still one of those where I would still recommend it, at least to give it a try. I realize that Lord of the Rings will have a little bit of a more restricted audience, but, I would have to say at least sit down and play a few sessions with it, because I think just that flavor and being able to pull in that Tolkien style, I think would just, at a minimum, would just be a nice recharge for players who may have been doing something else. So I absolutely would recommend it, but I do understand if people might not want to. Worst case scenario, while I haven't, I've only reviewed the Aliens role-playing game starter set. I've heard many good things about the Year Zero engine, so I'm very curious to look at the One Ring and see how they compare. Because if they have a lot of the same mechanics, maybe that might be a better option for you. But regardless, this is a great book. I enjoyed it. And like I said, I'm very grateful to Free League for sending me a copy to review. So with that said, that is my review of the One Ring the Lord of the Rings for Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. Let me know down in the comments, what do you think? Have you tried it? Have you played it? Have you played the One Ring? Did this help? Let me know. Comments, complaints, criticisms, whatever. Let me know. I'd love to hear from you. But other than that, if you enjoyed this, please do give it a like. Also, make sure that you're subscribed for more tabletop content. But otherwise, thank you for watching, and we'll talk to you next time.